mine, which worked fine. Goes in this spring-loaded slot on the side here. Now this uses a capacitor, not a battery, so you'll need to put power in it if you want it to do anything. So I've got this plugged into the wall, into a USB plug. So that powers the camera. It needs 1 amp to power up. Gets up and running. Always better to use a capacitor than a battery. Batteries wear out repeatedly being charged over and over again, where a capacitor will last an awful lot longer. So it's much better to use that system. When you unplug the power, it will save the file currently being recorded. It doesn't corrupt it or anything daft like that. Now, the buttons along the bottom of the screen, pretty obvious what they do really. Record, you press that, it starts recording or stops it. Obviously, it automatically starts recording when it receives power as well. The middle one goes into the menus. That turns the sound on and off. When you press that button there, you get a little beep. The end one would, of course, power the camera down if you wanted to do that. And then the orange one on the left, when we press that, it creates an emergency file. Now, an emergency file starts 30 seconds before you press the button and finishes 30 seconds afterwards. So you get a minute clip that the camera puts in a different part of the SD card out of the way so it doesn't get written over. You've only got 10 of those. See, I've got the number 3 out of 10 at the top that you can put on there, but that's plenty really. So you press the orange button. It's still recording in the background. You haven't stopped it recording, but it's also making this other file. It's an additional file. And it takes a while, so I've sped through this, but basically that file then gets moved into a separate area on the card, and then that number at the top right will go up to 4 out of 10 that I've used up. So that's, if you see anything amazing happening in front of you, just press the orange button and it'll save an extra file on your card if you want to just get those in one little folder. Very handy. Now you can go through the menus on the screen like this, which is very easy of course, but I'm attaching mine up to this TV screen with an HDMI lead so I can show you with a bit more clarity. It's a little bit easier than using my thumbs at the bottom of the screen and trying to hold it steady. Now if I press record, it won't record when it's streaming through HDMI, just in case anyone was interested in that feature. It won't do that. Press the menu button, we get into the menu screens here. So let me go through these one at a time. As I mentioned, there's 6 items here. Very clear, very simple, easy to operate for anybody really. Right, we'll start on the resolutions. Here's the different resolutions you've got. 2560p, that's a weird one, isn't it? I'll show you that later. 1296p, we've seen that before. 1080p with HDR on, 1080p with HDR off, 720p at 60 frames a second, or 720p at 30 frames a second. Now, the ones I'm concentrating on during this video, of course, the top one, which is new, and then 1080p with HDR on. I'll show you those later on. I haven't messed with the exposure value at all during the course of making this. Now, the G functions in the middle are all to do with the G sensor and the GPS. You can turn the G sensor on or off, but only if you've got the GPS attachment, otherwise it's off all the time. GPS settings and things, I'll show you what those do. You can put an overlay of your position on the display, I'll show you that later on, or a speed over the top of the video. And then smart warning systems, those are additional things that only come if you've got the GPS attachment. Lane detection warning system, forward collision warning system, I don't use these to be honest. Overspeed notice, it'll beep if you go faster than you specify. And speed camera warnings, I don't think that works in the UK, but I think you've got to get a database from somewhere for other countries. I don't use any of those things, I've tried them in the past, I don't actually like any of them, they don't seem to work properly for me. Now, display mode, you can turn the LCD off after a few minutes, as you can see there, 1, 3 or 5, or you can have it on all the time. But if you want it on all the time, you might want to adjust the brightness, and you can have it low or standard. You can have the date stamp on your video or not, as the case may be, depending on your preference. And also you can put a stamp at the bottom, which has whatever text you want in it. As you can see there, I've put tech mode on mine, so you'll see that on some of the videos later on. And you can have the image flip upside down, or you can have it mirror image, depending on how you've got the camera located in your car. Audio, you can have it record the audio or not. Or remember, you could press that button on the camera itself, and you can also adjust the sound of the beeps in the camera in this menu, or turn them off entirely if they get on your nerves. Playback, that's the menu where you go into to play back things you've recorded earlier on. You go through these set of icons, pick the little thumbnails, I should say, pick the one you want, play, lock it if you want to lock it, a bit like one of those files earlier on, delete it if you don't like it, or go back a menu. If you play it, you've got a limited selection of controls. You can play it, you can pause, you can fast forward, and you can rewind. One of the reasons for having an LCD based camera is so you can show footage at the scene of an accident or show it to a policeman or something, so that's what that menu's all about. Now if we get out of that one, the last one is system, few little things in here. You can change the clock, change the time on the clock, or pick up the time from a GPS setup and then change the time zone according to where you are relative to UTC in that menu. Never understand that one. Move on. Languages, let's go through the different languages. I'll just scroll down these. You better pick your own out if you've got good eyes on you. There you go, that was it. Version, that's the version of the firmware on mine that I'm testing here. Format the card inside the camera. Always do that with cards in dash cams. Don't format them in a PC, format them in the camera. That's where you'd upgrade the software, firmware I should say really, and that was it really. So let's have a look at some sample clips. Now I just want to mention, as always, YouTube video quality isn't going to be as good as the originals. Read that little disclaimer there. So if you're going to post a comment, say, oh, these look a bit blocky or whatever, or jerky, well, they don't. It's just YouTube that's messing them up. Download a sample clip and then you'll see the real quality. Right, I'll just take this opportunity to talk to the camera for a second, just so that you can get an idea about the quality of its sound recording. So that's that done then. Right, now this is a 1080p video, so it's going to be very difficult for me to demonstrate the difference in the different resolutions. For example, that's what 1080p looks like, the traditional 1920 by 1080. That's 2304 by 1296. Doesn't look any different really. I mean, the lighting changes sometimes between these shots, but that's about all. That's 2560 by 1080. Notice that one does look different, just because of the aspect ratio more than the quality. If I zoom in on these, I've done a crop just to see if I could figure out any difference in quality between them. There's a slight difference, but it's mostly down to bit rate, which you only really see when things are moving along. So let's show you some more moving footage so you can get more of an idea what I'm on about. Now, when I first saw that this camera did 2560 by 1080, I thought, well, here we go, another gimmick, but it's completely changed my mind after I've used it. This is an excellent resolution. I'll try to explain why. Look at this here, you can see Halfords in front of me. Notice what you can see left and right, all the building and the sign at the top. Right, now we're going to the 2560 by 1080. Notice what's happened. We've cropped the top and the bottom out of the image, but we've got the same width. There you go, that's showing it back again before. So what does that mean? Well, it means that I've got 2560 by 1080 in that center part of the image. So rather than just a 1080p video like this one, looking at the sky at the top and the dashboard at the bottom, which is something nobody needs, that's what 2560 by 1080 does. It shows you the important part of the image, the center part, the bit with the road and the road signs and all that. I'm not looking at the sky or my dashboard. And as you can see in shots like this, this is what you need to see. Remember, it's not wider, but it's concentrating all its bit rate and resolution in the center part of the image. So you've got a better quality image in this center section, and you're not bothering encoding and messing around with your dashboard or the sky at the top. I think it looks excellent, and it actually makes your journeys look a little bit cinematic as well, which probably isn't a bad thing. Now, the Vico dash cams are always good at night time, so let's just have a look at some low light footage. One area where the Vico cameras always perform particularly well is with their nighttime photography. So this is what I'm testing out at the moment. Now at this moment I've got it in 1080p 30, and that's the HDR mode, or at least that's what it says on the menu. Now I'm just a little bit interested to see if that makes any difference in low light conditions like this. Right, so here's the same shot, but this time I've done it in that 2560 by 1080, which doesn't have HDR in brackets after it on the menu, which I'm guessing means it doesn't have HDR in that mode. I'm not entirely sure. It shouldn't really change anything at night, and obviously it doesn't seem to either. Both resolutions, both modes, produce just as good nighttime footage, which is great because I like this widescreen type image. We're back to the normal 1080 now. As I go along this part here, you can see how it copes with a dimly lit road where the lights are quite spaced out, but we do still have street lights. And now I'll show you what it looks like in a lane where I don't have any lights at all. Again, we're still in the 1080p mode here. I'm just using the full beam on my car along with the spots here just to show you what that looks like. So excellent, really. Always good in low light Vico cameras, and this one's no exception. I suppose it'd be amiss of me not to go on about this GPS function for a minute, although it's not something I'm really all too interested in. You've got to get the optional Vico mouse, as they call it, the GPS mouse, which gives you these additional features shown on the side of the box, and I showed you in the menus earlier on. It's got a sticky back on it, so you could attach it to a windscreen if you want. It's also got quite a bit of cable, so you can just put it exactly where you want inside your vehicle. You've got a couple of GPS overlay options when you're driving along. To have either of them on, you've also got to have the time and date displayed. But once that's switched on, you've got a choice of either having the mileage displayed in kilometres per hour, as it is now. You can show the coordinates as well as the speed. And then, of course, you've got a final option where you could just show the coordinates and not the speed. Personally, I wouldn't want to put any of these things overlaid on my video, but of course that's just personal choice. At least you've got an option as to whether you want it on or off. So if I bought this camera, I wouldn't want to buy the GPS mouse because I'm not interested in GPS features. But if you've got this camera, you've also got another accessory you could get hold of, and that might reduce these reflections that you can see that are coming off my dashboard into the windscreen. To some people that's a big deal, so those people would need the quick release mount. Now, the quick release mount obviously lets you put the camera into it and out of it quickly, other than the fact you'd have to unplug the cables. But it also enables you to attach a filter to the front of it. It's got a screw thread on there, and you can put this circular polarizing filter on there. And that, if you twist it in the right position, might reduce the reflections that you get off the windscreen. Again, I can cope with reflections, but for some people it's a big deal. Now, this also makes the camera very large. As you can see here, when it's put in that suction cup mount, it makes it a very large unit. In fact, even if you use just the suction cup that comes in the box without the quick release mount, it's still quite a large camera. Now, it's much too large really for my car because I've got a very small car with a very small windscreen. It just takes up too much real estate, but it's something to bear in mind. The Marcus cameras are quite large devices. Now, as far as playback goes, you've got a few options. Obviously, you can play back on the camera screen itself. I showed you before, you can play back through the HDMI lead, and you can also download the Vico software for a PC and play back through that. Notice I've got the GPS data on the right hand side for the map, I've got the speed at the bottom there, I've got the G sensor information at the bottom, the files that I've loaded at the top right, and the video is playing on the left hand side there. Now, if you put files into this that don't have GPS data attached because you haven't got the GPS mouse plugged in or you don't have one, this is what happens. You don't get the speed at the bottom right, you don't get the maps on the right, but you just get the video playing. You get the G sensor information at the bottom there as well though. Now, you might as well play back your files just on your computer if you're going to do that. Now, on a Mac, MOV files play back natively. They're very easy, but you can play them on any computer with the right codecs. So, as far as rounding this up, let's have a go. Well, Vico cameras are always very well made. I mean, unless you've held one, you might not be able to tell, but they are really good quality, solid devices. They also think of quite a few different things. For example, see these little indents on the bottom? Those line up with this on the quick release mount. You might not have noticed that before. So when you put the camera into that, it means the camera won't rattle around. It's just nice little touches like that that they've obviously thought of. The fact you can put a filter on this camera is something that appeals to some people. You can't do that with many dash cams. The right angle cable means that you can put the cable over your headlining. Rather than having it just sticking right out the side, and it comes with quite a lot of cable as well, 4 meters. And the power adapter works on both 12 and 24 volt vehicles, which means it works on big trucks and things. I like the fact that the LED on the top of this stays on permanently rather than flashes when it's recording. It's only a tiny little thing, but a flashing light at night time gets old pretty quickly. I appreciate the fact that the camera works on a capacitor rather than a battery. Always a much more reliable system for a dash cam. One thing I don't like too much is the way the buttons are much too close together for my fingers. It's very hard to determine which one you're going to be pressing in the dark, easy to press the wrong function. You need a pimple on that middle button so that you can tell where your finger is. and I don't like the fact that when I turn the sound on or off, the camera makes exactly the same sound. I'd like them to do a firmware update and have a different sound for on and off. The main thing is though, I can't use this dash cam, it just takes up too much space in my car windscreen, which is a shame because I'd like to use one of these because they're excellent cameras. Now I've mentioned this to Vico in the past, and they say that really their cameras are designed for commercial vehicles, vehicles with bigger windscreens than I've got in my tiny little car, which I can appreciate, but it's still a shame. There's one camera on this list that I haven't tested, as you can see, the Marcus 5 Dual. Now I have got one of those and I'm going to be testing it in a few weeks time. I haven't got the opportunity at the moment, but I'm going to do a proper test on that and you'll see a review coming soon, so make sure you subscribe to see that. Now the links for the Vico Marcus 4 are in the description if you want to buy one. There's also links on there that'll take you over to my blog where there's some downloadable video samples. But that's the end of this look at the Vico Marcus 4, another excellent camera from Vico. Now remember, these aren't cheap cameras, but if you want the best, you usually have to pay for it. Anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.